The year was 1996, nearing 365 days into the Sega Saturn's lifespan, and things are looking rough. While the Genesis was a system so large and impactful that it even gave Nintendo a run for their money, the conversation, seemingly overnight, started to revolve around the battle between Sony and Nintendo, with Sega, well, trying their best. A shame too, because when giving the Saturn a fair shake, you'd be surprised by how many innovative experimental titles it housed that managed to hit the mark. Guilty pleasures aside, shameless pleasures such as Knights in the Panzer Dragoon series helped to make this console one that deserves to be discussed more frequently. Japan seemed to think so anyway, because to the surprise of everyone, it was incredibly popular over there. As a result, the library over in the East was granted the freedom to become that much more robust, leading the way to even wackier ideas and potentially higher quality titles, which I'm grateful was the case because it was due to these circumstances that on September 27th, we got a game like Sakura Wars. A game that made a hell of an impression upon release, and rightfully so. A ton of work went into this game, from the plethora of fully animated cutscenes to the heavy amount of voice work. The company clearly gave this game their all and wanted it to be a system seller for the Saturn. It was a new, bold idea that combined elements from various genres in order to create the compound extravaganza bonanza we have today. A visual novel, dating sim, adventure, and strategy RPG all in one. With mechas too, what even is this? Well, you can call it whatever you want. Sega and the fandom at large called it a hit. It sold very well, spawned all of these sequels, the titular character is still recognized as one of the company's most iconic faces, and it's one of the classic IPs in recent years that's attempted to have a resurgence of some kind. What an important legacy! Surely Sega's done their best to make the game that started all of this readily available for fans of the company to experience, right? Surely this series is as accessible as it can possibly be due to how unique the games are, right? Why am I not surprised? Despite its immense popularity in Japan, the plethora of sequels, gobs of remakes, dozens of live stage performances inspired by the games, and anime productions to flesh out the world, cast, and stories that much further, this series had next to zero presence over the pond. It was gonna get a re-release on the Dreamcast in English, but the company changed their mind. Japan can keep that one. In fact, let's give them the game again, and this time fully remake it from the ground up on the PS2. And nobody wants that. Japan will just have to keep that one too. Whoop-de-freaking-do. The most we got for the longest time was the anime adaptation until we were finally given the 5th game, which also happened to be the last for over a decade. At the time of writing this video, the only Sakura Wars games officially released are that 5th title and the new soft reboot, but all these other entries, including but not limited to the very first one, Japan exclusive, and as much as I hate to say it, I doubt that'll ever change. No, I'm not bitter. I'm pissed! With that said, you might be asking yourself, if this game's only ever been released in Japan, why are we here? Have I finally gotten fed up with all of my favorite series having a minimum of half of their catalog locked behind a language barrier and took it upon myself to study the crap because God forbid the companies that created the games do any work? Well, no. But fans took upon the burden of fully translating the first game themselves, meaning nowadays you can fully experience Sakura Wars from beginning to end in English. The only hurdle you need to overcome is finding a way to play this on official hardware, or get a Saturn emulator sorted out, which was the option I went for. An option I've been struggling to get down for a while, but after messing around with a multi-platform emulator and doing a bit of tech shenanigans, the library is no longer out of my reach, and Sakura Wars was the first on that list. You may not know this, but playing this game has been a bucket list item of mine for a while, so at last getting to do just that felt like a dream. Especially after going through the 5th game in the series and loving it so damn much, I was on a high as a newly established fan, and the only reason I haven't binged all of the titles by now is because I'm already done with the games that are fully available in English. For the most part, these games are incredibly well designed, engaging to follow the whole way through, and uses all of its captivating elements in service of truly great gameplay. All sentiments I could use to describe even the very first one over 2 decades later. I love it to bits and want to kiss it on the lips. Surely you wouldn't mind a video of some random guy you'll probably never meet gushing about the game in a quote-unquote critical manner, right? Of course not, so sit back, relax. Everything's gonna be okay because we're diving straight into Sega's lovely little game called Sakura Wars. There's a good chance you've heard someone describe a game as like if you were playing an anime or something along those lines. Well, you had to learn that my opinion was fact one of these days, so I'm telling you right now that there isn't a game that fits such a description more than this. Spread throughout the game, you'll have eye catchers. Everything outside of the combat portions are presented with illustrations or fully animated scenes. All of the game's chapters are referred to as episodes, with the game paced around this fact. And at the end of each episode, you have a little next time on Sakura Wars preview, hyping up whatever's happening next. No game feels like you're playing an anime more than this, and I love that. It helps the pace pacing feel familiar while working as well as it does, which we'll get more into later, but on the topic of how this translates to the game's visuals, woo-wee! This game looks gorgeous on just about every facet. It's not the clearest picture, the resolution is clearly as low as things had to be around the time, which is all the more apparent when you look at how the Dreamcast port cleaned things up, and everything's presented in this weird framing that leaves a lot of dead space in an already 4x3 display. An odd choice that seemed to be a popular one around the time, but a welcome one nevertheless. At least it is for me. I don't know if this is something you all can relate with, but this almost feels like an artistic, purposeful use of dead space to help me get in the zone easier, which consistently happened, making for this feeling more like a brilliant outside-of-the-box use of aspect ratios rather than a limitation. What a concept! I like it! In fact, I especially like how good the animation is. Sega's previous expansions to the Genesis tried their hardest to provide high-quality full-motion videos that led to a charming, yet inadequate result. But now that we're on the more powerful Saturn, that vision's been realized, and it's a sight for the eyes. The intro was a nice little appetizer, but upon starting the game, we're greeted with this incredible scene that immediately showcased the talent brought on board. All of the people walking about, the colors, how lively Sakura looks in motion. Oh, speaking of, man, what a great design. It's so simple, but it's so clean, so striking. And that's exactly how I describe the rest of the group. They're strikingly simple and clean, never overlapping or blending in with each other while refusing to leave my mind well after playthrough numero uno. In fact, the art design in this game from all angles is some great stuff. Our story is set in an alternate version of the 1920s, within Japan's Taisho period to be specific, making for an environment I haven't seen video games utilize before or since. Well, unless we're counting the rest of the series, but even then, I don't think any other entry is as in tune with the time frame as this one. Because we're in an alternate fictional version of this area, we do have elements that, of course, weren't actually going on at the time, like mechas or floating aircrafts of such a scale. However, these are all designed in ways that feel natural with the world around them and are all next to completely steam-powered. There's nothing here that takes me out of the experience or feels too modern for me to suspend my disbelief, making for such an immersive, creative location to get lost in. Even if most of your time is spent in the theater, because it's one that feels ripped straight out of the 20s, that helped to mentally prepare me for those moments where we do get to leave and interact with the outside world more, which you have plenty of opportunities to do, by the way. Though that said, it was still always nice to see new environments when on the battlefield, with all of its elements looking up to par as well. Sprites have that crunchy, pre-rendered aesthetic since just about everyone was all about those fancy new 3D graphics at the time, but I find this look to be so freaking charming. I don't know if you consider this style to be dated, but I'll never get tired of it. Going beyond that, however, I genuinely love how well animated both you and your enemies' mechs are. They all have this weighted movement to them, which you can fast forward in game, thank God, with the attacks being the real stars of the show. The mechs are designed to function in a way that mimics each character's fighting style, meaning you'll be seeing titanic robots unsheath their swords like a samurai or pull out a Glock because why not? Add in totally essential over-the-top special attacks and you've got yourself a great-looking game. A game that's seen 2 re-releases at this point, but even with those in the picture, I found myself visually satisfied just playing this one. Well, not that I can't play those re-releases. They're both locked behind a language barrier that still hasn't been torn down by the fans, but hey, wanna buy Sonic 1 for the 20th time? On a much brighter note, the fantastic presentation extends from the visuals to the audio. I love this game's soundtrack, being a decent length, but above all, memorable and high on quality. I could not get a lot of these songs out of my head well after playing it, but in a good way. This music's great and super fitting for whenever songs would play. I also appreciate this game going for one of my OST weaknesses by giving each of the main characters a dedicated theme. In fact, this game goes the extra mile by offering vocal renditions of those themes as well, making for quite the musical lineup. Yet even with all of that, the main theme is my favorite by a long shot, one of my favorite songs in the entirety of Sega's discography. It's so catchy and has such an upbeat, pleasant vibe, literally starting with a bang and never letting up on the energy. It's gotten remixed a few times at this point, but don't sleep on the original, it still brings the heat. And if all this wasn't enough for you, the game has a substantial amount of voice acting. Of course, the game isn't completely voiced, which is totally understandable given the time of release coupled with the sheer amount of dialogue, but there's a lot of it and everyone sounds incredible, which makes it all the more frustrating that the player character, Ogami, had none of his lines voiced over. He has grunts and clips in battle, but nothing beyond that, meaning there was someone there, they just weren't fully utilized. And I believe this was done so that the player could project themselves onto him throughout the campaign, but with all the talking he does both with and without the dialogue options, they should have just given him some voiceovers. Unfortunately, it seems like this problem has persisted until the soft reboot, so as much as I wish this wasn't the case, it's something we're all gonna have to deal with for the time being. Going back to positives, one of the defining aspects of this game is its lip syncing. Yeah, they actually went in and illustrated characters' mouths moving in accordance with what they were saying, and it's scary how accurate it looks.
あら、どうしましょう。これは失礼いたしましたわ。
As you can see, the text is also timed with the dialogue, but possibly due to this being an unofficial translation, it's not always completely in sync. Not too big a deal, just very noticeable in a few instances. Hell, I'm just glad I can understand what they're saying at all, and I'm especially glad I'm interested in what they're saying. I bring this up all the time, but it bears repeating, I'm a gameplay over story kind of guy. I'm not impartial to more story-driven games, I have played my fair share of visual novels, and JRPGs are my favorite genre, but gameplay has always been a priority for me when determining what is and isn't that good. And while I've tried smothering the notion, I'm not immune to getting slightly annoyed when characters and non-interactive elements start going on for a little too long. Though that said, this can function as a reliable benchmark to showcase a game's storytelling prowess when that doesn't happen over my playthroughs, which was the case for Sakura Wars. I was absorbed the whole way through and never felt like things dragged or went on too long because the story on all fronts was excellent. I believe this calls for a synopsis, because what even is the Sakura Wars story? Well, as we established, it's one that takes place within Japan's Taisho era and follows a young man named Ichiro Ogami. He's been assigned to join a secret military branch called the Imperial Assault Troops, specifically the Flower Division located in Japan. Exciting news for our up-and-coming boy, but his dreams are soon shattered when he gets to headquarters and starts to notice that things aren't what he was expecting. He's only met women for one, outside of his lieutenant general, and they're located in a theater, with his first assignment being ticket collecting? It turns out that this isn't the Imperial Assault Troop, but the Imperial Assault Troop, where their goal is to provide entertaining stage performances for the people of Japan. And our boy Ogami's gonna be collecting tickets while the girls all get to perform. What an honor. For a second there, Ogami's a little worried about the supposed end of his military career, but it turns out he wasn't entirely mistaken. This is an Imperial combat review that, while serious about the performances, also uses that as a cover to hide their true objective, to fight and defend the people and keep their spirit alive through the use of these mechas called Kobu. The enemy, the Hive of Darkness, whose motivations are all unknown at the start, but they spend a lot of the game summoning these monsters called Koma and placing some kind of energy crystals in a variety of locations while chanting. The mystery of this group, how our heroes rise to the challenge, and their blossoming relationships as teammates, friends, and maybe even more, all develop in surprising ways throughout the game's 10 episodes across 2 discs. 2 discs with 0 dull moments, baby! I love this game's story. It's so fun and easy to get into. For starters, how about that pacing? With the episode's average length being about 90 minutes, this game only took me around 15 hours to beat, and I made sure to take my sweet time. I explored how I wanted to, talked with as many people as I came across, did a few of the optional minigames. I wasn't rushing. The game just lasts for as long as it wants to, and I respect that a lot. Very attractive for those looking to replay the game, which don't be surprised if you end up wanting to, and then wanting to again. And then wanting to again. As a result of this brisk pace, the game managed to minimize any potentially slow moments without sacrificing the quality time needed in order to flesh out its cast. In the beginning, you may be fooled into thinking that the game is going to be playing favorites with Sakura, being the titular character and all, and even getting a good amount of screen time in the very first episode. But by the time the game was said and done, I was pleased at how equal a chance at the spotlight everyone was given. Each cast member has a chapter where they're the focus, and going forward, you can then decide which one is your favorite in order to play your cards right, since romance is an option. An option that feels more like a bonus rather than the entire point, which I rather appreciated. Trying to jump the gun in this game, and the entire series for that matter, more often than not tends to yield negative results because you're obviously making these girls uncomfortable. The game first and foremost encourages you to be a good leader, a good friend, and if anything else comes out of that, then so be it. This helps to make the game feel that much more natural, because it's not like everyone's just throwing themselves at you. Sure, maybe 1 or 2 characters have a little crush, but even then, the relationship shifting from a platonic one to a more lovey-dovey situation always feels earned and never forced. I love it, and I love that all of this is based on how the player chooses to personify Ogami. This is done through one of the game's defining features, the lip system, which stands for like the video and please subscribe. Sorry, what I meant to say was like the video and please subscribe. Sorry, I mean live interaction picture system. Sorry, slip of the tongue. You see the footage and you can piece together what these moments consist of. Live interaction with the game's pictures, since you're almost always given a time limit and always facing direct consequences. In this game's case, your teammates' trust with you will rise or fall based on how they feel about your responses, meaning your relationship with these girls will be dynamic, so even if you find yourself constantly screwing up and losing trust points like crazy, I believe this game is very well balanced around that expectation. Remember, because this is important, perfect play is not encouraged. I repeat, perfect play is not encouraged. In fact, it's pretty damn boring. The peaks and valleys of how these characters feel towards yours is a part of what makes the story as alluring as it is. You want to get along with everyone, but you want it to feel earned and real because, well, these characters feel real. The Flower Division is a lovable little group with tons of quirks and clashing personalities somehow needing to mesh together. I don't dislike a single one of them, with my favorites being Sumire and Sakura as my number one. The flaws are what make them all endearing, and Sumire especially comes off as a freaking jerk, and in a way, she is. But learning about her upbringing and struggle to express herself made me feel for her. She's clearly working on herself and has plenty of friendly moments with her teammates to compensate for all of her flaws. Also, I may or may not just like mean characters. What can I say? They're funny, which is a part of the reason why Sakura is so great. I've seen a few people refer to her as basic, and while I guess that's somewhat understandable, I don't want that to downplay how great a character she is. Her jealousy may come off as a worn out anime trope, but the game does a really good job at not just having it as a funny haha, but a window to her insecurities and self-confidence issues. Coupled with her journey as a sword master, a strong sense of justice, and being a really sweet person despite her moments of pettiness, I found her to be so damn lovable and very relatable. She doesn't needlessly hog the limelight either, despite being the titular character. It's just that whenever she is center stage, she doesn't waste a second proving why she earned the title in the first place. Respect! I like the villains a decent amount too, with my boy Blue Satan over here really stealing the show. Ayame was a great side character outside of the main troupe, and even Ogami was kinda cool. Points were off the bat for not being a silent protagonist. I love that there's some personality for me to latch onto, while not taking too much away from the dialogue options. This is how you do it, folks. Down with the silent protagonist. His personality, while not the most interesting thing in the world, is just likable enough, and most importantly, there were a good amount of scenes that really showed how great Ogami was fitting into the leadership role, meaning his ever-growing bonds with each character felt right. He's a good guy, I like him. Matter of fact, I don't think there's anyone here I outright dislike. Sure, there are a few side characters who aren't terribly remarkable, but is that really a problem? Sometimes we need a little fluff in the roster to help the real stars stick out, which is exactly what happened here. And with those stars, who you choose as your favorite will lead to their respective ending. This game was thought to be a standalone one-time thing, so every single one is as fulfilling and conclusive as you could hope for, while still having that little bit to where you think, yeah, I can see this continuing. It's all so satisfying. That's the key word. The great dialogue blurs the line between fiction and reality. The tone allows for silly moments as well as serious ones, with neither feeling out of place. The narrative's pacing lets moments last for as long as they need without taking up too much time. This is really the first game in the series. They got it all so right from the get-go. And again, you're gonna want to replay this because it's impossible to see everything in one go. Outside of battle, you'll be exploring the theater or other areas the game may decide to put you in, a lot of the time on a timer. Not one in real time or anything, but your actions are limited, which the game will actually tell you on one instance in particular, but never again. Kind of a weird choice, but I didn't mind. I tend to roll my eyes at how games these days are almost pressured into making every single aspect of themselves readily available in just the first playthrough. Easily available at that, because at that point, what reason do you even have to come back to a game if you've already done everything? People gotta stop caring about missing a few things on a single run, because the order in which you do things, how you go about doing those things, and what of those things you miss are all a part of what makes your experience with the game separate from others. Enough with the mindset of constantly chasing that golden run. In Sakura Wars, you will not see every event in one playthrough. You cannot romance every girl in one playthrough. You will not be perfect in one playthrough, and contrary to popular belief, that is okay. Make mistakes, get closer to certain characters than others. Who cares? It's your playthrough. Make it yours. If anything, finding these events on your own is what makes them feel special in the first place. Heck, because of this, finding them without there being icons letting you know where characters are turns out to be a good thing. It was so refreshing to just happen upon moments and scenarios. I was genuinely crafting a personal narrative because of this, making the bonds formed between teammates all the more realistic and my very own. But above everything, I love how all of this goes right back into the combat. Matter of fact, let's get the best part out of the way first. Not because the rest of the time will be spent talking negatively, but because of how integral it is to making the battle system as great as it is. And that's that in Sakura Wars, there is no leveling up. Your stats will either be above or below average based on your teammates' motivation, which directly correlates to how you treated them in that episode. Even if you somehow get every character highly motivated every single chapter, which as far as I'm concerned is impossible, there is no way you can just grind to have the bigger numbers and steamroll through all the enemy units. Proper utility of every character's strengths and weaknesses are the key to victory. Really studying the terrain and all the elements within the environment are nigh essential, meaning the game managed to have a constant difficulty curve that kept things interesting and prevented any way of cheesing it all. You can't just have a character highly motivated in one chapter and expect to carry that over for the rest of the game either. Everyone resets each chapter, which goes for both high and low motivation, meaning you're always going to want to be on your best behavior. When it comes time to fight, you have to stay engaged. Clearly, map design and enemy placement are more crucial now than ever, so that said, it's unfortunate that most of the map's objectives objectives are beat all the enemies. This game promotes strategy to an incredible degree, so as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't a better time to diversify those. Give me specific targets, a place to defend, or an area to reach. Something different every now and then would have been cool and fitting because the layouts of these maps are well designed. Distinct too, as they have special elements every now and then to incorporate into your strategies, with the act of strategizing being a possibility at all because of how much information the game gives to the player. As it should. The one big omission was a lack of any turn order, which felt like a weird oversight, but the order in which your characters acted was consistent enough to alleviate any potential frustration. Everything else, fortunately, was properly conveyed to the player, like every enemy's movement and attack range, their positioning, the entire map's layout, so on and so forth. As for your own options, well, there's a fair amount you can do, with the rules providing thoughtful limitations. Your moves are categorized by their general purpose: movement, attack, defense, info, and end. You can look at the info tab whenever you want, but everything else can only be used once per turn, with the end, of course, immediately ending that character's turn. On top of this, every character can only do a total amount of 2 actions per turn, meaning once you select an option from 2 of a character's tabs, they're done then and there. It may not sound like much, but this limitation by itself adds layers upon layers of strategies to the general gameplay loop. Both the option to guard and heal are under the defense tab, meaning you can't do both in a single turn for that specific character. You can also only move once per turn, either before or after various actions. Throw attacking into the mix, special attacks that deal even more damage once your special gauge is full, your position in relation to the enemies. There's a lot to think about constantly, with the game maintaining a fair challenge. Although later on, I did notice a few mobs taking more than 2 actions per turn, which was pretty unfair and not at all what the game was emphasizing up until then. Thankfully, bosses never broke this rule, but they also weren't too mechanically interesting. They were fine, and for the most part had you doing the same old dance. Hit the big target with lots of health and heal after the big hits. It's not like they bogged things down too much. I just feel like they could have elevated an already strong foundation that much higher, and it's one of the few areas where you can notice the rough edges on this first attempt. And here's another area, a move solely for Ogami, the protect option. A free action where you can block an attack on any character of your choosing 8 times per battle. This block will be activated every time the protected character in question is attacked, no matter where anyone is, and negates all damage for both the protected character and Ogami himself. It is incredibly broken, and there's no penalty for using this. In fact, it's actually encouraged, because when someone gets protected, their trust with Ogami increases. As a result, it's best to use this on your favorite, and a great way to gain hella trust points with that character. I didn't know about this until partway through the game, but from what I remember, the option is available pretty early on. And sure, there is a limit, but if the same character is getting attacked more than 8 times per battle, I have some bad news. You might not be very good at this game. While this is a pretty substantial issue along with the others I highlighted, nothing took too much from the immense enjoyment this tactical gameplay provided. Stats being determined by your bonds formed within that chapter is such a genius move, and makes the act of strategizing at all that much more rewarding. I don't think this necessarily needs to be the template for all strategy RPGs going forward, but it makes for such a novel take on the genre while tackling an issue that's been persistent with it for years now: grinding and its place within these games. After all, can you really call a strategy RPG just that when you don't have to be smart with experience points as a limited resource? Sakura War's answer to that is to just take it all away, with those stats able to be higher or lower by a chapter by chapter basis. Some characters will perform better than others at certain intervals, with below average stats not making things unplayable. They just throw a wrench in your play and you have to work around, since having a character fall in battle penalizes you by having that character lose trust points. Again, this lends itself very well to imperfect play. How boring would it be if you could max a character's motivation out early in the game and that be it? How you choose to treat other characters and strengthen or weaken your relationship becomes an integral part of the strategy. Socializing in and of itself becomes a major part of the strategy gameplay, which subconsciously makes the player more attentive to everyone's likes and dislikes. And because the player is more invested in what everyone has to say, it becomes that much easier to get attached. And because of how attached you'll inevitably become to the characters, the character-driven nature of the story suddenly becomes all the more enthralling. The domino effect continues to topple, and before long, you'll be into anything and everything this game tries to do as a result of how intertwined it all is, how clean it all is. I was no exception. It was very easy to become enamored with Sakura Wars, and I wasn't complaining in the slightest. What a game, dude, what a game! A game that seamlessly combines multiple genres in order to create what's referred to as dramatic action, where interaction with your party members isn't just dressing, but an essential tool in order to come out on top of battles that truly require strategy. A final product where the story, gameplay, and every way the game presents itself all work together in order to form something new yet cohesive. When it was first released, there was nothing like it. But even in a world with RPGs and social elements being as prominent a pair as they for Revolution and and good videos, the game doesn't become dated in the slightest and can still manage to hold its head high as a result of how much the two sides of the coin are interlinked. It maintains its standout characteristics, but more importantly, it's good. Really good. Like I said, the game is very easy to fall in love with, and that feeling will only snowball the more you play it, the more you think about it. It's a crazy mesh of niche genres, but anyone into visual novels, adventure games, dating sims, strategy RPGs, or any combination of those, you will love this game. I love this game, and I highly recommend it to just about everyone even watching this, because odds are you fall under at least one of those categories. Find a Saturn in the wild, figure out the system simulation, beg Sega for a re-release so it'll never happen. Whatever you have to do in order to play this game, do it. It's fantastic and a personal favorite from the company's catalog. A shame that the Saturn may never reach the heights and popularity the Genesis enjoys, but to those who do give this piece of hardware a fair chance, you're sure to be pleased with innovative experimental titles. I know I was, and all I needed to convince me of that fact was a game like Sakura Wars.
Tome